What's going on, guys? In today's video we're going to be pulling off the Supercharger off the FA20 Toyota 86 drift car. This is a continuation video on one of my previous videos where I had to pull the timing cover off and fix the crank gear and then the cam gear and then get it all back together and get it back on the dyno. So if you haven't seen that video, I'll put the link up here. Go watch it and then you'll be all caught up. If you have watched that video, you're going to be wondering how it went on the dyno. I'll tell you, everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong on the dyno. So I got it dropped off on the Monday morning before work, and then I got my first phone call about midday to say that there was a misfire on high RPM. So I actually redid all the spark plug over that weekend, and it just turned out I hadn't tightened one down tight enough. As it hit a high RPM on the dyno, it backed out, then it blew up the spark plug. So they pulled that out, pulled all the spark plugs out, put them all back in, replaced the one that was broken. Got it back on the dyno. This time they did a few more runs, and then all of a sudden the engine seemed to seize, which was obviously extremely concerning when they told me that over the phone. A crunching noise was coming from the back of the engine, so they kind of investigated it. They pulled the gearbox off and they found that the flywheel had like separated from itself. It had like a press fitting that went onto it and it just had come off. It separated, so it wasn't spinning. So they replaced that with a new flywheel that was spot welded, so it's stronger and before. So they got the gearbox back in, everything put back together, new flywheel. So they get it back on the dyno. After that, I was like, all right, sweet, nothing more can go wrong after this. They called me again after a couple hours, and they found that the cooling system on the Supercharger, they were having to top it up a little bit too much. So they did it about twice, and they decided to investigate what the issue was. So they pulled all the spark plugs out again, which it's an extremely hard job in this car, so who knows how much stuffing around it took them to do that. They pulled the spark plugs out and they put cameras down the cylinders to see what was going on, and we found that there was, in cylinder 4, there was coolant, which is, if you don't know anything about engines, having coolant in your engine is just extremely bad. Water doesn't compress and you just do not want that stuff in there. So it was either a blown head gasket or it was the Supercharger cooling system leaking in there. So that's probably the best case scenario. We don't want it to be a head gasket. So obviously they called me, they said, what do you want to do? I said, stop. Obviously, I'll come pick up the car, I'll get it fixed. They did offer to do the job, but they said they couldn't do it for about a month or two. So I've got the car back here in the garage and we're just going to start ripping into it. So all I got to do is pull off the Supercharger, just investigate what the problem is. Hopefully it's something small, send the Supercharger away to get rebuilt or something, and just go from there. For now, we just going to have to get into it. So one thing I'll say, I absolutely hate Allen keys, and this whole Supercharger is bolted down by Allen keys into the manifold. And the biggest issue that I'm going to come across is this Allen key is snapped. So it's been like that ever since I got the car, so I'm just gonna get into it, start pulling everything apart, just do what I can. I've got to pull the belts off, obviously. Intake off, belts off, which the belt needs to be replaced anyway, so that's fine. And then I'll start working my way around. I think I'll try to take off the intake first, and then work my way around the Supercharger. For now, I just gotta get into it. Let's go, it's Sunday, sun is shining. Let's go. So the belt's pretty fried, it was slipping heaps. You can see there's a few little marks in it. It's frayed along the edges. That one's pretty bad. So I bought a new belt. So we throw that away, take the intake off, and then we'll go from there. Alright, elbow intake off. That was pretty fiddly. I had to cut the hoses off the back of here just because I couldn't pull them off, but I did get to the Allen keys not too bad, so that part of the job is out of the way. We'll put that down on the car and we'll get into taking the Supercharger off. So the elbow is off. This should be like a reasonably easy job, but the only thing that I'm actually concerned about is these Allen keys that actually face up. Those ones at the front are alright, but these ones here are just going to be difficult to get to. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 that face upside down, and as you can see, there's a fair bit of stuff in the way. The gearbox is right there. So we'll get cracking and see what we can do. Alright, so I've just been working my way along. I've gotten 3 of these Allen keys out of the bottom, but the cooler piping is probably in the way for the 4th one. So I'm just gonna go ahead and drain it, because we're gonna have to do it eventually. Just drain the, so this is the intercooler for the supercharger. So I'm just gonna pull this hose, drain the cooler into there, and I can pull it off here and hopefully get it out of the way and yeah, make it a little bit more progress. It's going all right. It's actually, sorry, I shouldn't have said that, but it's going all right. We'll see how we go. All right, so we've got that off. While this is off, I'm actually going to replace it. It's designed to go around like the front bumper and then a lot of things in the engine that I don't have anymore. And you can see up here, it's been rubbing. I don't know if you can see that. It's been rubbing on the pulley for the supercharger. So I'll probably get something more straight and run it myself. And then, yeah, you don't want to be running the risk of having any marks or anything on your intercooler piping. So as you can see here, I've got the intake elbow off here. You can see all the oil that's in there. See all that? That's why you need to run a catch can. That's why I've got the catch can installed on this. This obviously, because I've only installed the catch can recently, so who knows how long the car was running. But you just only want air going into your intake. You don't want all this oil and stuff circulating back through your engine. So definitely recommend getting a catch can. I wasn't sure if I needed it when I installed it, but now that I've pulled this off, you can definitely tell that you definitely need one. So there's the proof right there. Get a catch can. They're not very expensive and they obviously do a lot of good for the engine. So before I put this back on, I'll be cleaning it out. Alright, so I've made some pretty good progress. Got the 4 bolts on the bottom, all the ones on the sides. I haven't done these ones at the back. They're actually reasonably hard. What I'm thinking is that I'm going to have to pull because the cooler for the supercharger is on the bottom of the supercharger, which is on top of the manifold. So I'm thinking I'm going to have to pull the manifold off anyway. So I'm thinking of stopping with the supercharger now and just pulling the whole manifold off. And then that way, once the manifold's off, I can just pull the supercharger off super easy. It'll be upside down because it's got to come off anyway, I'm assuming. So I might even do some research tonight and then keep working on it tomorrow and see what I come up with. But I'm thinking that's going to be the way to go. I've had a look like with all the bolts and it seems like it'll be a reasonably easy job. I say that all the time and it always ends up being 10 times harder. So I'll see what happens. Tonight I'll look up some stuff and then I'll get into it tomorrow. Alright, so I'm back. I had a little bit of research last night. I could only find really one video of like this kind of install. You don't need to take the manifold off to get to the cooler from what I can tell, but I think I'm going to take it off anyway just because I think it's going to be a lot easier. It seems to be a lot more accessible to get to the bolts of the manifold rather than getting to the back here and like getting an Allen key in there. These 4. So for the manifold to come off, there's 3 bolts on each side, 1, 2, 3, and then the 3 there. So all I got to do is disconnect the fuel line to goes to the injectors, and then that way that will stay in when I pull the manifold off. Disconnect that, do some other stuff. So I actually made a discovery last night. Ever since I bought this car, I've been calling the supercharger a Sprintex supercharger because that's what the guy told me it was and that's what I thought it was. They look exactly the same, but what I've come to the realization, I'm pretty sure, it's actually called an Innovate supercharger. I'm guessing it's a rip-off version of a Sprintex, but yeah, so it doesn't say Sprintex anywhere, which I always thought was weird, but I just, like, they looked exactly the same, so I never thought anything of it. But turns out, from what I can tell, it's an Innovate supercharger, so a little bit of knowledge for me. All right, so I've just pulled out these 2 12mm bolts so that I can pull the fuel rail out with the injectors. Got our 900cc long nose custom made injectors. So now that's out of the way. 1 bolt for the manifold, 1 back here, and then there's 1 down there. So we'll do the other side and then hopefully this comes off reasonably easy. I'm sure it won't, but let's see how we go. This extendable, bendable magnet is worth its weight in gold. So I've got those 6 off the sides. Now I've just got to do this big Allen key Hopefully that comes off all right. All right, so I've successfully taken off all the bolts. 6, 3 on each side, and then the one, that big Allen key at the front. Now I've just got to work out how to pull this whole thing off. There's just all these AC lines and fuel lines that are in the way on this side, but it should come off pretty easy. Dang it. Damn, that's heavy. I just forgot. There's one hose clamp here where I've got to undo, so I'll undo that. And then we'll go for round 2. All right, round 2. That was like the return for the intercooler piping, so it should come off now. Put your foot on the old alternator here. Oh yeah. Yes. Whoop, we got it. Woo. That was heavy. That was heavy. Okie dokie. Spilt a bit of coolant. So just as I was pulling that out, I threw a rag into the head so that no coolant would leak in there. I didn't get a chance to do this one, but I plugged the intercooler pipe at the back so it wouldn't leak out the back when I pulled it out, which seems to have worked all right. So it's all good. Manifold off with the supercharger. Now I'm going to be able to flip it over and get to these Allen keys now. Pull that off. You can see all this oil in the back of this, in the back of the supercharger. That's all from not running in catch can, like I mentioned earlier, because your air is going in, circulating back into the engine, and it's picking up oil. It's picking up oil as it's going through the engine, and it's cycling back in. So if you install a catch can goes between your PCV line and then the top of your intake there, so it'll pick up your oil as it's going through instead of cycling it back in, which will just save you. Obviously, look how much oil is in there. Obviously you do not want that. So I'm definitely glad I put the catch can on now. As we can see, it's obviously doing it will be doing its job. I'm going to pour this stuff all apart, clean it, and then we'll throw it back in, and then from then on, like, we shouldn't have any of these problems with the new catch can. This is pretty cool as well. So this is a twin screw supercharger, so you can see you got your one screw there, and then when I turn the pulley or the shaft, whatever you want to call it, you can see turns the screws, compresses the air, gets it into the engine. So I just flipped it over to have a look at what the head gasket was like, just to see if there was anything, but these don't seem to have a head gasket. They just have an O-ring. Oops. They just have an O-ring here, and then it's bolted down, and there's no silicone on it or anything. So I don't know too much about that, but I have no idea actually. I'm gonna have to look it up and see what the go is. Most engines have a gasket, and that's what keeps the pressure inside the engine. So have to suss it out, look into it, see what the go is. Maybe I'll run some silicone around it when I put it back on, just for extra goodness. But I mean, that was why it came off so easy as well, because it didn't have any silicone or anything holding it down. So we'll do some research on that as well. So now I can comfortably remove these 4 Allen key bolts that would just, you definitely could have got them on the car, like if you had cut an Allen key down, and then like it would have just been really fiddly. This is way easier, and it was only 7 bolts to pull off the manifold, and I think I did the right thing. So we'll rip these out and see how we go. Alright, so one thing that I got ahead of myself on and I completely forgot about is this little bastard. This Allen key piece that's broken off in the manifold. So you can see this, it wants to separate. It is really stuck down with silicone, but I'm gonna have to, I bought an easy out kit, so I'll have to get into that, screw it, easy it out, and then see what happens after that. Got the easy out kit, easy out. If you don't know what an easy out is, when you snap the head off a bolt, obviously you can't get it out anymore. So you get your drill bit, you drill a hole into the bolt, then you screw in your easy out, and then once it's in, you can turn it back the other way because it grabs. And then once you've got it in, you can turn it back the other way. You'll be able to screw the bolt out. I've actually never done it, so this is gonna be my first time doing it. So hopefully it works out all right, but we'll see how we go. Fuck. All right, so I just went ahead and hit my thumb with the hammer, but after that, I just did a center punch on the bolt so that when I drill it, it's not slipping around. So hopefully that helps. All right. So, I just drilled, the kit came with a drill bit and the easy out. I've drilled it in, I drilled the hole, it took me a few goes to just get it deep enough. And then you put it in and then you just tap it with a hammer and then you screw it out. You screw it anti-clockwise with a shifter, and as you can see it's starting to come out. So we'll just keep going and yeah, it should be out and then we'll be able to pull this bad boy off. And there we have it, little bastard, little bastard. All right, that's out. So as you can see, we've got that out, all good. Now I can start prying this supercharger off. It's all silicone down, so it's not gonna be super easy, but we'll see how we go with that. Whoa. Dang! Oh, well that was way easier than I thought it was gonna be. Although I did just squash my finger, but not bad. Supercharger. Hut. Yeah, dog. And that's the twin screw, supercharger. All right. Now this is the intercooler. You've got your little fins. Coolant goes in, keeps the charger cool, and then it goes out. Now I've got this like pops out, but I don't know how I'm gonna get this out. I can take this stuff apart, but it's well beyond my knowledge of like actually knowing what to do with it, if it's leaking, what's the problem with it. So I'll get it all pulled out and then I'll take it to a professional, probably take it down to Heath at Lauderdale Rapid, see what he thinks, and then we'll go from there. All right, I just pulled this little bung out of the front. I don't know if it's the front or it's the back. But basically I need to get these out so that this cooler can pop out, because it's just sitting in there, and then these go in and they seem to hold it in. I haven't been able to find any videos or anything like that on like an install or a deinstall, but there's one video on YouTube and it's like just a bunch of pictures, and you can see in the pictures that they've installed the manifold first and then they drop this in after, and then obviously these go in last. So that's how I kind of know what's going on. But yeah, I'll actually put the link in the description to that video because it's helped me a little bit. So I just got to try and get this other one out, which is a lot harder. All right, so I've got that one out at the back, but I can't get the one out at the front. I've tried a few different things, but I don't want to damage this seal too much. But I'm thinking I'm going to take this down to Heath. Maybe while it's in there, we'll put that bung back in and then we'll pressure test it, and then we'll see if it's leaking out of these fins here, because you can see there's like, I don't know, you can't really see it in the video, but it kind of there's like a little bit of discoloration here, like maybe where the water's been sitting or coming out of. So I'm just going to chuck this in a box and take it down to Heath, and then we'll just see what he says. Alright, so I've just dropped off the intercooler and manifold part to Heath, down here at Rapid Tune, Lilydale. I pulled that bung out, but we're going to pull it back in maybe, and then we'll pressure test that system, see why and where it's leaking, if it's even leaking. And then we're just going to have to go from there. So I'll wait for a call from Heath, and he's going to have a look at it for me, and then yeah, we'll see what happens, and we'll go from there.